Hey guys!
Happy Saturday and welcome back to
Latte and Foam. We missed you guys last week when we were celebrating Kayla's birthday. She turned the lucky 25.
On the 25th.
Ooh, cool. Anyway, no, just kidding. Anyway, so for today's video, we wanted to talk about a newer game to Voltage, which is called...
Which we actually read it on the night of my birthday.
Yeah, we
together
did.
Until like 2 a.m. and it's called Romance Renegades.
Hey, it's Kayla from the future. Just to let you guys know, this video has tons of spoilers. If you don't want any spoilers, I would just come back to this video after you've already played. Okay, bye!
Yeah, so right now they only have one guy character out, and I know that they're planning to release more. But when we first saw the game, there was only the main story out and the epilogue out. So that's what we read, was just the main story. So the main guy's name is Mikiya.
Yes, and we were super interested to play it because it looked really dramatic just from the little ads that they do on the front. And we noticed that it was definitely an older art style. And you know it's got to be an older game because they're pretty much only putting their money into Love Choice right now. And this one's just like a classic Voltage game.
Yeah, so we both read the story and then we basically started breaking it down.
Texting about it, like back and forth from our rooms, like...
So yeah, so we're here to just give like our honest opinion about it, and if you've played it, you can definitely let us know in the comments below, or if you want to check it out yourself and see how you feel about it. But yeah, this is gonna be our take, so let's get started.
Yes.
Right.
So starting off, we have actually a video coming up soon. We're going to be rating like the worst NCs in Voltage and all Otome games really. And just a little spoiler, this is definitely going to be on the list because this NC is beyond frustrating.
Problematic.
She's extremely emotional, like extremely, to the point of like being completely irrational. And sometimes she just decides to do things to where it makes no sense at all.
It's just weird. So let's just like break down some like key points of it. Like for this game, the background premise is just to give like enough background that we can. It's about you working for a bank, a major bank branch, and you own like one specific account. So you're like a personal banker. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, and you're doing really well in your career because you have this big account, which is it Miyake? I forget his name already. Misaki, yeah.
And so you handle Mr. Misaki's account, and then you notice a little bit of like errors going on. Like it seems like money's going in, but there's not enough assets. Like something's just not working out. So you feel like, let me go find my boss, who's the main guy that you're playing right now, the only route that's available, Mr. Mikiya. I'm gonna tell him what's going on. As you're walking through, you run into his rival, which you find that's his rival in the prologue, and he works also for the bank. This guy.
Yes, you actually do tell Mikiya, like, oh, I actually need to tell you, but then he has to leave. So then you walk away, and that's when you run into
Joji? Koji. Sorry, I'm like, I have like Joji days on the back of my mind and like Koji Joji rhymes. So I'm just
there's so many games that we play, we just get their names mixed up.
So you run into Mr. Koji, who you don't want to tell anything to, and this is, I'll bring up a key reason why this is like so out of character for you, but Mr. Koji's like, what's going on? And you're like, I'm not going to tell him what's going on. I'm going to wait till I find Mr. Mikiya, who you've worked with for 5 years and should obviously trust. He says, oh, for no reason, you guys have really never ever talked at this point, which makes her frustrating.
And he's just like, you can tell me anything. And for some reason, she decides that the anything that she can tell him is this like top secret information about an account that's actually higher level than Koji. He's a lower level person.
And you just tell him, but literally 2 minutes, like about 15 lines before, you're like talking about how awesome it is to work on Mr. Misaki's account and like how high profile it is, and your best friend, who's also your coworker, Nozomi, he's like, oh my god, how much was it? Let me see. And you're like, I can't tell you that. That's too top secret.
Yeah, she makes like a whole big deal about it being top secret. That's why it's so like, what? This is like number one of the idiocracy of the NC. Obviously they do this to move along the plot and it's very obvious, but it's just like, you could have thought of a better way to do it. Like,
yeah,
basically she spills her guts to Koji,
who she doesn't really know and is only known for a second, and then he says, wow, well, we're actually investigating these kind of things, and who we're investigating is, literally says it, my rival, Mr. Mikiya.
Yeah, he's like, you shouldn't tell him anything, even though you were planning to tell him.
He's suspicious, we're investigating, blah, blah, blah. So you're like, not gonna say anything. And then you literally don't tell Mikiya everything. And now we fast forward, and now you're the one that's accused of embezzling this money. And now you're kind of you're what would be considered, I call it mall jail. Like it'd be like mall jail, but at a bank.
Yeah, basically they go to the back office in the bank, and then they're just like, we're gonna have to put you in jail because for embezzling of Mr. Masaki's account. And he's there too, the rich guy that you're on the account for. Your boss is there, and I believe Koji's there too. And they all throw you into this dark little mall jail, basically.
Yeah, and then Mr. Mikiya, who's your boss, busts you out.
Yeah, so the door opens, it's a light, and then it's like, who's reaching out to me? It could be in the future, it's Misaki. Who else is it? Detective.
Yeah, Detective Kurata, and then your friend, the pianist, whose name I can't recall.
Yeah, a friend of yours that you run into the prologue, who's playing the piano at his house.
I don't understand how that would happen that he's there, but okay.
Yeah, I don't either. Somehow he just busts you out. That's one point, like we'll touch on it a little bit more later, but I have no idea how the rest of these routes are going to go because the plot is super linear and it's pretty locked in from the prologue. So it's like, how are they going to switch it up to make it interesting to play the other routes?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that either. But anyway, so you go and you're kind of like on the MC's on the fence of like, should I trust this person or not? Because I've just been accused of a crime I didn't do, which is smart until as you're like leaving, you're going to your apartment because you want to get your stuff because you don't trust Mr. Mikiya because you're
talking with Mikiya and you don't trust him, yeah. So you decide, I want to go to my house and get my stuff, and he's like, yeah, sure, that's fine, but let's be careful.
Because, you know, yeah, there could be cops because, you know, you just got accused of embezzling and you're supposed to be in bank jail. So then you go to your house and you see the detective, who I also have a problem with because he really doesn't do anything.
There's a bunch of people and she doesn't even get up there. She's like still on the ground floor.
Yeah, and so then Detective Kurata wants to talk to Mr. Mikiya, which plays out later as to why he's like talking to him. And then Koji, who's suspiciously at your apartment, is like, come with me, I'll help you get out of this. And for no reason at all, after you just said that your way out of being with Mr. Mikiya is to go to your apartment, you just go off with Koji and never go into your apartment.
Well, you can't get up there, I believe, because there's like a bunch of police officers up there, and then Koji tells you, oh, I'm gonna take you to somewhere safe, and they arrested Mikiya. So you're like, okay, I can kind of see like her getting on board with it, because she's like, okay, well, he got arrested because he did go into another car.
Yeah, which was the cop car. So that plays, and like that is suspicious, but it's also suspicious that Koji was there at all.
Yeah, and now let's take this point, this little data point that we need to remember, is they're in the car for a while, driving to this random place, and he's like, this is a place I haven't been to in a long time, like it's deserted, and I'm just gonna keep you at this villa. And so Koji puts you in the villa, but then you start to notice it's spotless, it's stocked with food. How is it that he hasn't been here in a while?
Yeah, like it was like he was waiting, like it looked like he was ready for somebody to already be there.
Like set up for the hostage.
Yeah, and so, but it takes the MC a whole day to realize that this is happening. Mm-hmm. She goes to sleep like a baby.
She trusts Koji that whole night.
Yeah, and so then she wakes up the next day and she gets a phone call. Now here's the thing that I will say that I have to absolutely believe it's dated, because if today's society, we're going off of it, was like present day, you know for a full fact, if you had your phone on you and you turned it on, they're gonna track your phone like
tracked.
that.
Yeah, especially there's multiple times where like detectives call her later on and stuff, and they're just like, oh, where are you? And she's like, I'm not gonna tell you.
It's too cold.
In real life, they would track that. They would track that call and know where you are.
Yeah, like easily know exactly where you are, but they don't. So I'm saying this had to have been in like the early 2000s, maybe like late 90s, early 2000s.
I feel like they might have wrote it in the late 90s and then it didn't get actually produced and like out there into the market until early 2000s. I feel like that with a couple of their games, like Celebrity Darling. That there's something on there that says like 1995. Anyways, you get a call from Mikiya.
And we'll get to like how they talk in like a minute. Those are like other like small problematic things.
Yeah, there's a lot of little nits. This game has a few issues for sure.
Mikiya's like worried about where you're at because you like up and left while he was talking to the cop, and you're like, I thought you were arrested. Like, what's going on? And Mikiya makes a good point. If I was arrested, how would I be calling you right now?
He's like, I did not get arrested. Like, I'm ready to take you somewhere.
Koji lied, and this is like another point where like MC's borderline stupid because
from that point on you should not trust Koji.
You shouldn't trust anybody. I don't blame her for not trusting Mikiya, but
she's worked with him for 5 years though, and there has like one flashback where he has her back, like, and you can get the relationship that he's always there for her. So why would you trust this random rival of his more?
It just is weird. So she ends up leaving the abandoned cabin to go meet Mikiya in a public place.
Yeah, and another thing that's weird, remember how she was driving for a while to this village, she has no idea where it is? She just walks to this cafe by her house to go meet with him in the public, walks there.
So how did she know where she was at? How did she walk to this place? And how did she get there in a timely enough manner? It really is to progress the story so that the two of them can meet up, but it doesn't make sense because they don't write how she got out of there, really. They just blur it together.
They have like a lot of good ideas, but they just don't like connect them properly. It's a little bit lazy the way they do it. They should have thought about that detail.
Yeah, so then she's talking to Mikiya, and basically he says, like, you don't trust me, I don't trust you, but like, let's do this together. And then who do you know shows up at this public cafe at the same time? Mr. Koji. It's so weird too, because it's like, how did he know that at that exact time? It's like he planned it out because.
But at that point, like, it's kind of cool. Like, this is one thing I can commend them on is they do this cool thing where like, Mikiya actually loses trust in you, even though he had been trusting you the whole time. And you're just like, I don't know if I can trust you. But when Koji bursts in and is like acting like you're his boyfriend, or that's your boyfriend, and he's just trying to save you to take you back to his house, like you guys always hang out together, that's how Koji's acting. And so Mikiya being smart is like, I don't know if I should trust you then, because this guy's suspicious.
Yeah.
And you're acting like all buddy-buddy with him.
I did like that. The only thing I don't like is that they keep doing this. There's rumors going around that, like...
there's a lot of plot holes where they just lazily slap things on there just to like move the plot forward. I'll say that.
And so then, like, Koji's like, don't go with him. And then, obviously, because Mikiya is the main guy in the story for you, you go with Mr. Mikiya. Oh, and that's another thing, is that before you actually agree to meet up with him, Mikiya gives you his phone.
Yeah, that's another weird thing.
That's how it happens. It was that... No. Sorry. We actually got some of it wrong.
Wait, no, I think that's later.
That it wasn't that you meet up with him after he calls you. You go to your house, and that was the problem.
Okay, yeah, you go to your... We missed this whole plot point. You go to your house, and it's completely locked. Your keys don't work, and all of your furniture is, like, vacated out of it. You can see through the window. And basically, you call your landlord, and he just, like, brushes you off and tells you like, oh, well, I'm mad at you because you should have told me 60 days notice, but your brother told me and he moved all of your stuff out of there, so it's done. What's done is done. I gotta watch a show. Bye. And so you automatically start to think, oh my gosh, I bet Mikiya pretended to be my brother and did this. Like, you don't even think that it could have been Koji, even though he left you at the villa by yourself.
Yeah, but I also could see where she could either think it's either or, because both of them were at her apartment. Well, he like went with her to the apartment, but that was the last thing she sees is him at the apartment.
Yeah.
How does he know where she lives? And then same thing with Koji. It's like, it's one of the two. But she never suspects Koji, which she should have also suspected.
She like more suspects Mikiya, so that's why when she gets to the cafe, she's like, I can't trust you, and then that's when Koji comes in, and then that's when Mikiya's like, well, I can't trust you, but then you and him make a run for it. So what happens after that? They're on the train or something like that?
Yeah, they're on the train, and again, so at this point, something that also has like a kind of a plot hole that doesn't make sense to me is that you had Mikiya's phone, his company phone, and he has a regular phone, and then you have your phone. And I'm not sure who's calling which phone, but you keep answering any phone that's available.
They basically dropped that plot point, I believe. Like, Mikiya gives his personal phone to you, and then that's never talked about again. And it just seems like you're just opening your own phone and answering that.
Yeah.
It's supposed to have died, but...
Yeah, your phone's like died like 8 times at this point, and whatever.
They never talk about recharge again, but whatever.
Before the train thing is that you're walking through the town, and they go on the news, and they announce that there's some woman that works for the bank that you work for.
Oh, but before that, they are at a hotel, and Mikiya's like, there's so many plots, sorry guys, but Mikiya's like, listen, let's just go to the bank together, and I'll help you explain everything. Trust me, it's gonna be fine. So you reluctantly end up agreeing to that, and then you guys are walking through the streets to go to a train to go back to the bank, and that's when you see on the news that there's a girl that they're looking for.
Yeah.
And it spooks you guys.
Yeah, which is why I think it's not... Because, like, if it was in, again, more present time, social media would already have your face, your name, and all of your details.
They definitely never talk about, like, social media or anything like that.
So, yeah, they don't ever expose your face.
Only people who work at the bank that know she was accused.
Yeah, so your friend at the bank is like, I know it wasn't you, but the more you stay away from the bank, the more they're going to accuse you. And you're like... So many times agree with that point, and you're like, still not going back.
I know, because I think that's part of what like pushes you to do it. But once because they've always said that there was somebody embezzling the account, but then when you're walking through, they're like, she's in her early 20s and it's a female, and then that's when you're like, oh my gosh, they're gonna know it's me. Like, people are gonna narrow down that it's me, and so that's when you guys decide to go back on the run and you get on the train. And at this point, you're kind of trusting Mikiya a lot more until he gets up to make a phone call and he goes to another car, and he's gone for a long time. So you're basically like, well, what's he doing? And so you go to look and see, and he's actually meeting up with a person, like a physical person, but you can't see that person, and he's talking to them, and you overhear like a snippet of him saying like, yeah, I just have to do this because it'll be better for me later on if she doesn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
And so then that puts it back in your head, like, I don't know if I can trust him.
Which I would say is okay, because it's like, you have no idea what's going on.
Well, why not just ask him? Like, he ends up coming back and he's like, he notices you're being weird. So he's like, is everything okay? I feel like he could be like, I kind of overheard what you said. What was that about? Like,
and she's like,
she doesn't do that. She's just like, nothing. And then in her head is like, I'm gonna get away from this guy.
Yeah, so then they finally get to their destination, and it's like near a beach on this like abandoned cabin, which is Dusty has not been in a while, which would mean that he was telling the truth, that it was like, this is some abandoned place, whereas Koji's wasn't.
Yeah, so you can see the parallel there. Mikiya's being honest about it being abandoned, and there's no food. He has to go to the grocery store, and you use that to go and call Koji because you decided you're not going to trust Mikiya anymore. So this is what pissed me off. The choices are go to the grocery store with him.
That's when they get to the second house.
Oh.
Because there's 2 houses they get to. The second house.
Oh my gosh, this is such a long game.
And
What was the first house then?
It was just like a cabin that's on this beach, and then like that was like their first moment together.
Oh yeah, that's their one and only conversation that isn't related to this.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about the fact that he was like a lacrosse player or something, or what was it?
Rugby.
Anyways,
they go on the run the next day, and then they find another house, which they get into this like house that he has a key to. Which again, when she's suspicious of that, like, so why do you have a key to this house? But then she has like a good reason, like, what if it's his relative's house? Like, what if somebody knows?
That's what he said. He said it's like a relative's house and that no one's ever been there for a while. And that place is dusty and dirty too.
Yeah, so then they clean it, and then he's like, I'm gonna get groceries, let's go together. And she's like, yeah, but then she remembers.
That's when they have the choice. They're like, yeah, I can go with him, make up an excuse or something else. And I chose, yeah, go with him. And so she's like, yeah, I'll go. And then he's like, okay, let's go. And you're like, never mind. And it makes me so mad. Like, what was the point of that choice?
Because she needed to call the detective. Which, by the way, every time she talks to the detective, it's like he gives her an opportunity to continue to run. He's like, where are you? You know, like, it makes you look suspicious if you keep running. And she's like, I know. And he's like, well, just let me know where you're at.
And she's like, well, I don't really know. And she gives him, like, a street sign she remembered seeing. But that never goes anywhere.
They just dropped that point. So that continues on.
Oh, is that when she finds his phone too? Because when he goes,
Misaki calls.
Yeah, and Misaki calls Mikiya's phone, and she hears it ringing when she's home, and so she goes and
rudely answers the phone.
Yeah, she just doesn't say anything, and so he starts talking about some plan, but he doesn't get into details.
Which then she gets suspicious of Mikiya again, which actually makes sense. Like, if somebody was like, you can't talk right now, we'll talk later, and the person you're accused of embezzling their account calls the person you're on the run with, you think that they're in cahoots. So that part I can understand and say, okay, that's a good, smart instinct of her. The only one she has.
So we'll skip forward a little bit. There's like more stuff that happens. But basically she decides that she suddenly remembers that her sister's wedding is the next day. Or like that weekend or something. And so she gets mad at Mikiya. That's why she stopped trusting him again. And so then she calls like Koji and is like, Isn't it normal for me to want to go to my sister's wedding still? Shouldn't I go still? And he's like, yeah, you should go still.
Which is super suspicious.
Yeah.
It's so annoying too, because it's like, you literally are on the news and got accused of embezzling and you're about to get arrested. So I'm pretty sure you can miss your sister's wedding this one time.
Yeah, but Koji's like, no, go for it. So you're like, yeah, I'm breaking out of here. So you break out and go to your family home. And everything seems fine at first. It's like you guys are having a nice dinner together, but then the news flashes on and they actually release your name this time. So they had never released your name at this point, just your age and your gender. But then they say like, it's this person, and then everything goes downhill. Your sister's future husband calls off the wedding and doesn't want shame on the name. Paparazzi starts flooding the place. And then that's when Mikiya calls you and basically helps you out. He's like, I told you this would happen. Like,
yeah, he's like trying to have your best interests at heart. And now, I know what you're thinking, where's the romance in there? There is none.
There really isn't any. Basically, you're just led to like believe out of context clues that Mikiya's just always kind of liked you.
Yeah, there's a lot of this parts that are up to assumption, where you're like, because you worked for so long, so he's probably admired you this whole time, that Koji has to be jealous of Mikiya.
Yeah, like why is Koji like all over you? It must be because he's jealous. Like you just kind of have to put it together. And then there's one moment where a head person in the bank calls you the prettiest girl in the office, and he basically says like, that's all you're good for. Mikiya stands up for you. But yeah, so basically you're like, okay, well if she's really pretty, then that would make sense why he wants to be with her and protect her and stuff.
But anyway, so this whole thing happens and your sister like hates you, which again, I kind of don't blame the sister. Like I'd be mad too if my siblings
thought it was your wedding
ruined my wedding and my relationship because they got in a scam. But like, you know, so as it continues on, like you can keep running, and like there isn't really, like, there's like small moments where you think that you like Mikiya and you try to confess to him and he's just like, no. This is because I keep saving your life. You don't really like me.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So he ends up like covering more ground and he gets information that basically implicates Koji. It's really stupid the way that they explain it because they're like, and the code spelled Koji. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not how easy it is.
So yeah, they're just like going in where they're like saying like every time she typed in her code or like her password and everything, it would just like screenshot or snap it and like the passcode to that happens to be the bad guy's name, which is Koji.
And they like uncoded it or whatever.
A couple of things. They never worked at a bank. Whoever wrote this never worked in really coding.
No, it's so fantasy. Like it's not realistic at all, and like they don't really take care on those little details. So now that that's happened and Koji's pretty much been nailed down as the real culprit, then you start to really trust Mikiya because you're like, wow, he's really been there for me this whole time. And you're staying at Misaki's mansion, which is the guy who basically got embezzled. So now you're really sure, like, okay, I'm staying at his house, like, he doesn't think it's me, like, I'm in the clear. But
what should you do when you have all of this evidence and you for sure know? You should go to the cops and who you have on speed dial, Kurata, and be like, okay, I got this, like, we're gonna get this taken care of, like, don't worry.
But what does dumbass Mikiya do? He goes, no, I want to show all the evidence that I have to Koji and make him turn himself in.
Mikiya says that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he does, I forgot.
He does. And it doesn't work out. He comes back the next day and it didn't work. So basically they try to gather a little bit more evidence. Oh yeah, and then this is when he plants it in her head. He's like, oh yeah, but he said that the evidence is probably fake. And so then you're like, well, what if it is fake? Like, you start freaking out about it.
You don't think the MC could get any dumber, and then she does.
Yeah, also it's important to note, before she does this dumb thing, he confesses his love to her. So you had tried to, and he was like, no, it's a suspension bridge effect. It's just because of all this crazy stuff going on. But then the next day, he's like, you know what? I was wrong. I love you. And so now they're in love. With no build-up whatsoever. You're in love. And basically at that point, she decides to save him for this really, really stupid plan. Do you want to explain what this? I just can't even.
So I want to preface too. This, like, a bunch of times Mikiya says, are you sure you're not with Koji? Are you sure you don't like each other? Are you sure you two are not dating? What she does literally would have proved him right every other time.
Yeah.
So she goes over to Koji to prove the evidence isn't fake, and then she
calls him up first.
Yeah, she calls him up and she's like, let's meet up, like, whatever. Literally hands over the evidence to Koji, who then
because she goes over there and she goes, hey, is the evidence fake? And he's like, of course it's fake, because obviously he's trying to save his own ass. And she's like, oh, okay. So he's like, can you get me the evidence then so I can destroy it? And she's like, okay, yeah. Like, what? This is such a dumb girl.
And basically Koji says, because she's like, then you have to clear, like, basically whatever, clear this whole thing up. And he's like,
she goes, please clear my name and his name.
And so he gives her, he's like, if you give me that stuff, I'll only clear either your name or his name, but not both.
And you just have to tell me which one you want. She's like, okay.
Which bothers me so much, because I'm saying, as a woman, a strong, independent woman who don't need no man, I would never, I don't care what happens. I know that that Mikiya has been.
You would never even gone to Koji.
I would have gone to Koji. That was our first mistake. But I'm saying, let's say I was kind of dumb and just ignored all these red flags and made a scarf with it and went over to Koji's house and did this, and they were like, see, that you saved the guy you're in love with for no reason, or save yourself. I've been like, well,
I'll save myself.
I mean, it's been a good run. He's had a good time, but nobody told him to get involved. So, like...
But anyways, you go back with him, and then you take it in front of him. You tell him that you're actually in love with Koji, so you basically break his heart. And then you're like, yeah, so I'm going to give him this, like, drive or whatever with the evidence. You go back, he burns that, and then he tells you he's going to burn the room down, and he ties you to a chair or something.
Which is so random.
It's, like, so randomly dramatic, and you're like, I'm going to die. That whole mess could have been avoided had she just not called Koji.
It would have been done.
Turn the evidence in, case closed.
They could have gone home.
No, she caused her own problems. And then he comes and saves the day, I believe, with Detective Kurata.
Yeah, because Kurata's been, like, waiting around, not helping at all. What a terrible cop. It kind of reminds me of Bad as Bitter Cop. What's his name? That guy?
A little bit.
So they do this whole thing, they get everything together, and, like, it's all resolved, and they basically go and walk off in the sunset of, like, she still messes it up.
No, it's still not done yet. Like, once
that's what should have happened. My bad. It should have happened, and then
well, they still needed to get more evidence because they destroyed the evidence.
Right.
So basically, but Kurata's on the case, and he's going to do that. All they need to do is just go away to Detective Kurata's relative's house in, like,
there's like 6 houses at this point.
I know. It's, like, far away in a rural area. So they do go there, But then they go out to the market together, even though her face is plastered all over the news, and a cop runs into them and is like, oh, you're new in town, like, what are your names? So they make up names with the last name Kurata, because they're staying at a family member's house or whatever, and he's like, you guys look really familiar. And so that freaks her out. So she decides that instead of staying at the house with Mikiya, she's gonna throw her phone into a river and walk back to her family's house.
When is it that it's just dramatic? There's another dramatic point too. She attempts suicide.
Oh yeah, I think, was it after that or before that? Or no, that was right when she's at the family's house the first time.
Oh yeah.
And that whole thing goes down. But anyway, she goes to her family's house and she sees like her sister ripping up like papers that were plastered all over, and like there's like all this trash in their lawn, and she's like, oh, I can't go here. So she just kind of like keeps wandering around homeless. And then it comes out on the news that her name was cleared and Koji's in jail and everything. And when Mikiya's on the screen, he's like, I just want you to know if you're out there that you need to come back. Like, we all like miss you and want to apologize to you.
I wouldn't miss her at all. I'm like, she's caused enough trouble. Yeah. So then they like get back together and like everything's like basically done and over with.
It is right there. You don't get to see her go back to the bank ever. He just ends up finding her at that beach that she tried to commit suicide at.
And that's that. But there's just so basically the whole game itself, I think the story is super dramatic and it could have been more.
It kept us entertained, but it wasn't well done. It was like cheap entertainment, you know what I mean?
It's just so many problematic things, and I think there were just a lot of ideas that weren't fully fleshed out. It only needed to be if she was embezzling, like go with this idea. If she's really on the run, make it so that they almost get arrested a few times. Like so many things that could have been more fleshed out, and it wasn't. And it was just too like lazy plot, right? Like so much.
And I feel like they just basically Mikiya just kept getting like dogged. Like he was a good man to her the whole time. And she at several points betrayed him. And
there wasn't enough romance. So like if this is a game, if you're like, obviously you go to Voltage to play romance games, this has very little romance where you're kind of confused as to how they get together. Like you're like, yeah, no, I don't get it.
You're just led to believe that in the past there was romance between you guys, so you're just picking back up where you left off.
It's just a lot.
It's weird.
Yeah, and then just some like nitpicky things. So the translation, because it obviously was originally in Japanese, there's some things that were just too slang-like. So there's
it didn't make sense.
There's a key points where like obviously Mikiya calls the MC and he's like, yo. And you're just
he says yo all the time, and they always say I'm a.
So yeah, like when Koji asks Mikiya to hand you over, he's like, I made you hand her over.
Like to his superior, he's like, I'm gonna need you to do this. It's like, what?
No.
And then they also said there's this one phrase they would say, oh, I said what I said. Like
so much attitude.
Like he said what I said, he said what he said, but this. I mean, they kept using that phrasing like over and over.
It was just bad. Really weird. It was not cute. So, but yeah, so those are like the really small nitpicky problems. But overall, I would give this game like a 3 out of 10.
You would give it a 3 out of 10?
I just think there was too much problematic, like lazy writing that. The story was super intriguing.
I feel like it was worth $3.99 though. Like
I do think it was worth $3.99, but I just don't think. Okay, you know what, you're right. I would probably give it like a 5 out of 10.
I would give it a 5 or a 6. And I mean, some people might rate it lower due to the art style, but I actually like retro art. I know you don't like it as much, but I actually really enjoyed that part of it. It was kind of nostalgic and like it did feel very nice.
Some of those chapter cards though.
Those were so nice. It was like what was it, like a dove?
It was
like a dove in the sky. Like it was in blood.
So you just like didn't finish things off. Like did the sisters like and her husband get back together?
Yeah. Did you make up with your sister? You sent her a text. I think that's the last thing that you hear of that. What happens when you go back to the bank? What about your friend Nozomi? Like, did she say anything? Like,
and I know basically with the sequel it should answer this, but for me, the way that this is told is that once the main story is done, that's it. There's no more. That's why I was saying it was like lower, because the way that this whole thing is written is that there's no need for additional parts of the story. It's done and over with. What else could you go off of? Whereas Vultures has a cinematic universe that you can just have more things occur. But it's not centralized on one plot. It's
weird, because the whole gimmick of the game can never happen again unless you get accused of embezzling again, which would be kind of cheap. It's like, how many times in someone's life do you really get accused of embezzlement?
And at a point, then something's not right with you. But I'm just saying, like, when you think of other games, like in Voltage, like, let's talk about, like, okay, Dream Days is, like, based on where you're at. Or when you think about Star-Crossed Myth, it's about the gods, so there's so many things that could happen. Mm-hmm. But when you have something like this majorly happen, it's so, like, that's it.
Yeah, I just feel like if the whole reason that attracts you to it is the drama, I don't see how you're going to get that from season 2 or 3. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And the
That's
prologue
just me.
is set up that only Koji could be the bad guy because he's obviously the bad guy. And it's weird that unless the same scenario happens in each other route, how does the prologue fit for every other guy?
Yeah, because why would the guy that's basically putting you in jail and accusing you of the embezzlement, because he's the guy who's getting embezzled, he's an option. So he saves you from, like, couldn't he just be like, hey guys, don't arrest her? Like, I don't
know. She didn't do it or something.
And then the detective, I guess, could make sense because he takes her questioning,
But
maybe.
the friend doesn't.
Yeah, he really doesn't, because you haven't seen him in all the way until that one event, so I don't know how they fit him in.
I don't know how it'll go, so I guess it'll be somewhat interesting to see when they do release it and like how
I
it
think
goes.
we will play at least
just to like
2
see
more.
to understand. But for
And
now,
it was nice that it was just the $3.99. It wasn't Love Choice, so I recommend it simply for that.
I'm actually glad it wasn't, because if it was a love choice and I went that far, ooh no. But
No.
basically to wrap it up, you don't have to play this particular route because we just explained.
You just
how
explained everything
yeah.
for you.
But if you still want
You
to,
can still play it if you
totally
want.
check it out. Maybe you have a different view, or maybe you saw it a different way than we did. But
Yeah, if you
definitely-
already played it, comment below and let us know what you think of it.
But let us know, and also don't forget to submit your questions and your comments for our next high tea video. But yeah, that's it, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.